I'm Evan Ouyang of Animoca Brands. I'm the president of the company, and I guess I'm glad to be here.
Hi, afternoon everyone. My name is Terry, and I'm the founder of Metasens. Our company develops games.
Hi everyone, my name is Max. I'm a relationship manager at AAX Trust. We are Asia's leading digital custodian.
So before we start, I just want to get a little bit of an idea of the audience. You just have to raise hands, and if you don't want anybody to know, like, just kind of move your head so I know, but nobody else knows. Who of people here are, let's say, invested in NFTs? A few. No, well, I would say like 8%. That's my guess. 8%. How about crypto? Crypto traders, crypto investors, crypto speculators. Oh. How about activity, being active in DeFi? So whether it's trading on a DEX or staking or taking part in that. Okay, interesting, right? It's the same guy. It's my brother in the back. Yes, me. Okay. Exactly. What about GameFi? This is even more rare. So, how many people are actually active here in this audience in a game, in GameFi? Okay, interesting. Also very interesting. And lastly, there was one more. Well, okay, let's just keep it like that. I think that's okay. So, what I would like to do is, as well, at the end of this talk, to kind of open up the space as well for some questions. So please do think of some questions if you're interested to learn more about everything. Oh, I know. Who owns some land in Sandbox?
Well, the company does.
The company does. Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to ask because it's very interesting. So actually, Evan, I would like to start with a question for you, specifically about the Sandbox, actually, but you can expand as you wish. Let me just read it to you. You could say, for now, that the Sandbox is kind of seen as one of the more mature metaverse environments at the moment, compared to some of the others that are still up and coming like that. Could you help to understand? Could you help us understand a little bit what's made it so successful? What is the thing that made this particular metaverse space successful in a sense?
Well, I mean, it's hard to pinpoint specifically about this is the ingredient because it's sort of like it's a combination of things, right? So we step back for a second. What Animoca Brands does is that we try to build and we try to invest at the same time, right? Into gaming metaverses or games or verticals that we believe have a Web3 application. Is this good? All right. It's just hard to, people in the back can hear me? All right, good. So the Sandbox was our earliest majority asset, right? And the history of us began with building mobile games. And a lot of the App Store games at the time were actually, it was on App Store. And about many of the top 20 games were actually on the App Store. But because Apple believed that Animoca gamed the system and actually went on to take some of our apps off of the App Store, right? So we realized, came to recognize the fact that the platforms are actually too dominant in the Web 2 space, what we call the Web 2 space. And we then got into the distribution of Cryptokitties. I don't know if you guys, anyone heard of Cryptokitties? Right, some of you at least, right? That's actually the first major NFT project that is actually sitting on a blockchain, and it's the highest value one actually got sold for more than $100,000. And then we recognized that wow, this is actually the space about where gaming is going is actually going towards true digital asset ownership. Then the entire company pivoted itself in the strategy in about end of 2017 and 2018. And then we purchased Sandbox, right? That was what then happened. And Sandbox at that point in time was a Roblox and Minecraft type of environment, type of game. It wasn't built on chain. There was no such vision. And yet Seal at the time, our co-founder, was steering the company towards putting everything on chain. So at the beginning, when you have that kind of audience, and then you're saying that, okay, well, this is digital asset land, this is like, it's scarce, there's 166,000 of them, no more will be made, it's all systems of blockchain, became a bit of a novelty. And to be perfectly honest with you, last year, we're still pushing the land, meaning selling the land, pushing it out, right? Hey, please buy this, please buy that, and people were sort of getting warmed up to it, right? Maybe last year the sum was exaggeration. Maybe about, maybe beginning of 2020, it was still sort of like being sold in large lots and all that. Nowadays, when brands come to us, we don't even sell the land anymore. We're kind of like, what do you want to build on it, right? So being early is important. It's the same as crypto and same as NFT. Obviously, I don't like to advocate for speculation. I like to advocate for you liking something and you collecting in it and you contributing to the community, because that is how Web3 space is. Is that if you get there early and you believe in it, you might take the ride up, like Bored Apes, for example. There's nothing in any asset class that would have returned you more in a 12-month period than Bored Apes, right? So those guys are laughing all the way to the banks because they might have bought one, and then you bought one for you mint it for next to nothing, and then you get dropped 2 mutants, and then those went for like 40 ETH, and then you get dropped a Cano, and then you get dropped ApeCoin, and then you get participate in the land, you get dropped a land as well. So if you hold on to it, you are $3 million richer in 1 year's time, from nothing, no capital whatsoever. So people are now going after Azukis, they're going after a bunch of other stuff as well. But again, be careful, right? Because it's about the community that folks actually are building. Like Sandbox delivering what it is promising. You guys are watching that, obviously. But ultimately, the way it is successful is because of the philosophy about building community.
Thank you. I will come back a little bit on the Sandbox in a minute, just open up the conversation more. So actually, this one is for Maxwell from Hex Trust. So let me look at my text. So, Hex Trust, I would describe it as a crypto custodian, but you can correct me. Can you tell us a little bit about... So what I know is that Hex Trust has some land now in the Sandbox, and we don't have to make the whole panel about Sandbox, but I think it is a very interesting use case, and it'll lead to a lot of different discussions. So could you explain a little bit about, what is a crypto custodian doing buying land in the Sandbox? What's the idea there? And perhaps also, maybe more broadly, can you help the audience get a better understanding of the role of a crypto custodian, and especially how that grows as the metaverse kind of grows, as the Web3 space grows, how that interlinks, maybe?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So for those who don't know what a crypto custodian is, or a custodian for that matter, we essentially we play a very crucial part in holding, moving, as well as protecting digital assets. And we're first and foremost, we're partners with Animoca Brands. And as Animoca Brands, as Evan just elaborated, as they continue to push the envelope on true digital asset ownership, Hex Trust similarly are going to continue to look for venues and ways to spread the knowledge and disseminate essentially how important it is to keep your investments and your identity safe on the blockchain. We hear of all these stories about these scams and these hacks. Well, we take that as part of our mission in order to move forward in a safe way. So one of the ways we believe that we can get this knowledge out there is by participating on the Sandbox, which is why we invested and we bought a 6x6 plot of land. We plan on having a branded landscape, maybe having an NFT gallery somewhere down the line, but really just focusing on having an immersive experience, like Evan said earlier. It's about the experience on the Sandbox that people are going after, on top of the knowledge. So we plan on having a nice game, possibly, on the Sandbox, and as well as having an archive and gallery and a library full of videos and tidbits of knowledge of exactly how a custody really comes into play in everyone's lives on the blockchain. And what was the second part of your question, sorry?
As a crypto custodian, you're expanding your services as the kind of world around you also, evolves. And so if we're entering into this Web3 phase, or we see Metaverse, you know, what's a like? Are you going to be the are you going to protect the land? You know, is it the assets that you're looking after? You know, just how do you see the services of Hex Trust evolve as the internet evolves, actually?
Right, right. So I think what I said earlier, right? Custodians really play a massive and important role in keeping assets safe, moving it, as well as protecting it in the future. Not just for individuals, but also for institutions, and actually, especially for institutions. I think my colleague in the back actually sent me a report, quite interesting, the other day. PwC reported on how institutional crypto funds had amassed and doubled in size from 2019 to 2020 to about $4 billion. I mean, that was 2 years ago, so you can only imagine how much more the industry has grown since. And with this growth is going to come with an increase of activity, not just for commerce, branding, but also individual, true identity ownership on the blockchain. And with all these different activities, there's going to need to be a matching, if not exceeding, standard of security, by in which security needs to encompass more than just keeping things safe, but also how are people going to interact on Web3 in the metaverse while having their assets in custody, and also having it scale up in an interoperable and kind of a, definitely, I think the key word really I'm trying to drive home here is safe way. So that's really a big part of our mission, big part of our goals. I mean, if you were to look at, let's say, going back to the land analogy, an investor wouldn't just buy land, right, and not do anything on it. Like what Evan just said earlier, you want to build things on them, possibly even lease it out. You want to do things with the assets that you own, not just passively. And so Hex Trust really is taking that as really part of our mission to enable individuals, institutions who use our services to safely interact on the blockchain in Web3 with their assets in custody.
Because it's quite interesting, right? The idea of custody is also a central principle just generally in crypto culture, where the first principle is actually, you know, you hold your own assets. But of course, at the institutional level, there may be some other rules that you know they need to comply with, and so it's quite interesting to see how the infrastructure is developing like that. I'd like to actually go to Terry now, but then return to the sandbox with a follow-up question from a second ago about Metasens, or actually more about GameFi. We just had a panel about GameFi, and you know, one of the things that comes up is Axie Infinity's Smooth Love Potion, which is currently trading 40 times lower than its all-time high, which is pretty disastrous. You know, there can always be recoveries, but it's very important that we take stock of these developments. This is not new. If you've been in the space for long enough, like, this is a common occurrence, right? There's some hype, people grow around it, and then there's something doesn't match, and it just kind of plummets. Things can recover, wonderful, but we also have to learn from these kind of, you know, hurdles on the way. So what I'm very curious about is the balance, let's say, with Metasens that you try to achieve between playing and earning, because GameFi would have to be a combination of both gaming and finance, and it's not just about the finance part. So I'm very curious how you're driving this kind of long-term sustainability, not just at the token level, but at the game level first.
Yeah, so how we look at this is we see a lot of projects going on that are calling themselves GameFi. They're using this keyword a lot to actually cover themselves. So you see, like early 2020, there's a lot of NFT games that actually just asking people to buy NFTs, but then you actually don't have any gameplay in it. So what it does is simply just allowing the customer to purchase the NFT and getting partially the interest back. That's what's happening. But they're missing a lot in the gameplay side. So what we're doing is we're trying to find the balance between the gameplay and the financial part. And as for the gameplay, we believe to make sure we have a sustainable system, we have to give enough updates. We're making sure the clients are happy with the game, they're having fun, they're not just making money. And we want to make sure they have the full gaming experience. So we want to focus on the gameplay first, and then which lead on to the rewards part. But then in terms of the reward, we so far we can see a lot of companies are just simply giving out rewards, but they don't have a proper ecosystem. So what we do is we trying to study a lot of different cases and then try to come up with a new solution where it will be more sustainable. For example, we're looking at the rewards where we're seeing the player as part of the team. So they actually help us to gain more users, building trust into the community. They are just working like developers, but just in a different position. So we, for example, we're paying our employees or developers tokens, but the rewards actually as a paying to their effort and helping to build a community and a game. So in that way, we think it's not simply just a reward we're giving out. It's also a way to incentive everyone to build a stronger community and a game itself.
The community part. Evan, I have a more critical question for you, but I think you're very capable. So today, actually, I don't know if you saw, but in CoinDesk, there's some questions raised around kind of land sales in the metaverse, saying that some of the things that give land in the real world value can be, for example, proximity to something high profile, right? Or a very unique productivity of that land, like maybe it's very fertile, or maybe there's some underground well where you can pump water. It's very value variable. In the metaverse, this is all artificial, you could say, and even distance between a plot of land. Like, let's say I want to get a big house, a metaverse house next to Coca-Cola. It doesn't really have to be next to Coca-Cola. I can be in the corner and just go there, right? That is one part of my question. It's like, how do we get to reality in the metaverse? That's something that I'm very curious about. Secondly, big brands are buying into Sandbox. It's just like CryptoPunks. It almost becomes inaccessible, you could say. And I'm very curious, are you guys thinking about this, and how do you see that evolving to make sure that it remains accessible? Thank you.
Yeah, no, both are good questions, and they're fair, right? So in terms of proximity, it's my personal view is that since you can teleport, I don't think you have to necessarily be next to Snoop Dogg. But if you're next to Snoop Dogg, you know what you do? I'm next to Snoop Dogg. It does have value, right? So when we auction our land, our observation is that the stuff that are more on the side does not sell as much as the stuff that goes in the center. So it doesn't matter, right? We don't make judgments about stuff like that, but at the end of the day, the community around them, about where they walk around, matters, right? But we can also ask similar questions. Why do people need to crowd business center into central? So obviously government is saying, you can be in Island East, you can be in Kowloon East as well. They're trying to develop those centers as well. Not really. There's no reason for anything for being, right? Except for the fact that people buy into it and they believe in certain thing. But in terms of tying it back to real world, we have to also ask what are value of brands in general, right? When you ask why are people buying these expensive JPEGs, which is what people talk about now on blockchain, they're immutable, fine, people get that. But why am I buying that mutant punk? Probably goes for 150 ETH, I would think, right? It probably that's a lot of money, right? That's it's 2,700 ETH dollars per ETH. So it goes for it's pretty expensive. It's $500,000, right? US dollars, that is, right? Why would you do that? Why we can just take a picture here and then hung it up, right? But the same thing is kind of like, why do you need to own a Picasso? Why do you want to own a Mona Lisa? For the ladies out there, why own a Chanel bag? Why own a Birkin bag, right? Because it's a representation of who you are. Being next to Snoop Dogg represents who you are. Being next to certain brands represent who you are. There's no real value in living in a peak either, I would say. In fact, why not live near MTR, right? Because of the fact that they may tell other people, I don't live in the peak. I would say maybe people tell other people, come to my house at the peak, or maybe that the view is better, or that there's no real representation about what the why and the how into hard and fast rule as to why you have to do it that way. But in terms of digital scarcity, I would say the following, right? While it's true that there are two prominent pieces of project that has land involved in it, at least at this point in time, which is Sandbox and Decentraland, right? Those are the original ones. Now there's also Bored Apes of Other Deeds, which has just dropped a big pieces, 100,000 pieces of land as well, and its purchase all sold out in within 3 hours. So these are the prominent projects, right? The question that a person like yourself might have is, should you participate or not? Well, if you look at it from a speculation perspective, I would say don't. Never speculate, right? If you want to get to know it, right, and sort of like, you want to engage in it, there are many ways to engage in it, like participating in it when Sandbox is out for season 3, then play on it and do things. You can play to earn, which is the premise of this. Not everyone needs to be asset owners or land owners, right? So Phantom Galaxies, we're also selling planets, right? Which is going public sale. You don't have to own the planet, right, to play the game. I think it's an awesome game, right? I play it, I get hooked onto it, I like it a little bit too much, but you don't have to own the planet. What do you get when you own a planet? Well, you get to organize fleets, you get to organize resources, you can build on it. It's your way of engaging with that community in which you like. But if you're kind of like, well, I don't really like it, all I want to do is just flip it for a big quick profit, well, then all I'm saying is just be careful, because things go up and down very quickly in crypto communities. So, but if you do want to go for sort of like, no, I have an investment mindset, I do want to like have a little bit of asset allocation to it, then go for the things that are tried and tested, right? So anything within the Bored Apes community is pretty tried and tested. Anything within like a Sandbox community is pretty tried and tested, right? Would you just go in there and buy a Sandbox, a pixel dog? You guys have to decide on that, right? But if they're sort of like, you do believe it's rare, it's sort of hard to create, there are a lot of people backing it, it's unlikely it will go down, because once it decentralizes, right? The whole point about this whole ecosystem is about decentralization. Once you get to the point where it's like owned by so many people, why do people believe in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all that? Because ultimately it's so decentralized that it becomes a common trusted currency, if you will, in the world that will continue to exist unless civilization disappears, right?
I have a question for Maxwell. We will, in about, let's say, 10 minutes, open up to the audience. So, Maxwell, because on your end, you handle a lot of clients, institutional clients, and so maybe within the bounds of reasonability, can you give some insight into the things that investors, you could even say maybe high net worth investors, look at, pay attention to as they look at NFTs, I would say specifically, to make it more on point. Just, it will help for people, if they want to go and speculate, at least know what to focus on when they speculate, at least.
I think, I think the word is considerations, right? Yeah. The considerations, really, I see it as, can be divided into two things. First part is whether or not you should even enter the space, okay? What are your considerations there? And after you make the decision to enter the NFT space and then maybe even into the metaverse, what are some considerations there? I think, like Evan said about investors versus collectors and enthusiasts, they will come from different places and will have different considerations and questions in the beginning. Investors will definitely consider, what are my returns on investment and how long is it going to take for me to get there? Enthusiasts and real believers in this space are going to think, well, is this a project that I can get behind? Do I believe in this? Do I believe in the founding team? Do I want to be a part of this? So these are very different questions, right? After these first tranches of questions are answered, I think everyone will arrive to the point of, how do I protect myself? Investors are going to want to know, where can I hold my investments? Where can I hold my investments? Where can I, while holding it safe, where can I trade? Where can I also do some financing? And enthusiasts are also going to want to have a safe place where they can store their massive investments into their personal digital identity. They want to, after you own something, if let's say you were to buy an expensive car, you wouldn't just leave it in the street. You would ideally wrap it up, maybe put it in the garage or something, right? So that's essentially also a consideration, right? And I think before you enter into the NFT foray, it's very, very important to first of all figure out why it is you're getting into the space. If you are trying to make some short-term money, it's going to be very hard. It's going to be very, very hard if you don't truly understand why it is that pushes the value and the prices of these NFTs up, right? Like Evan said earlier, it's not about how much money you can make in a short period of time. Contrary to, and a lot of these investors right now in the NFT space come from traditional finance. The big difference here in the NFT space is, if you were to remove all the ambiguity in today's traditional finance, right, you're going to have these valuations where people can reason and rhyme about why things are worth the way it is now. But the thing about NFT projects is, most of the time, there are no cash flows for you to discount into present value, into today. So what are the drivers behind the prices and the valuations of these projects? It's really about the communal belief in the founding team, the belief that these guys can actually deliver. If we were to look at these successful projects like Apes, or maybe even recently Moonbirds, right? Why is it that these guys suddenly shot themselves up into blue chip status in the NFT space, where you'll have these random collections of also NFTs, right? Genuine NFTs where people just kind of want to doodle and do their own thing and issue 5,000 of them out there, and then they'll just die out and fizzle out in a few months. Why this difference? And that's really because of the belief of the founding team. Kevin Rose is a big name in Moonbird, right? He was very successful in Web 2, was behind and pioneered a lot of the great investments in Web 2. And I think that's really what pushed and really generated all that interest in Moonbirds. And it was sold out in under an hour. And same with Apes. I think what they've done is quite phenomenal, right? Putting out the original 10,000 apes and then showing the community that they really stuck true to their word by then dropping potions, turning those apes into mutant apes, and then issuing ape coins, and then just 2 weeks ago, other deeds. There was a lot of clout before, right? When I forget what was the exact number, 102 apes went on sale at Sotheby's, that whole canvas, right? And there was so much flack that the purchaser got for spending $24 million on it. And guess what? Just an ape coin, he earned 16 million back. Just an ape coin. We're not talking about the mutants part and the lands part as well. So really, I think the considerations should be divided into these two things, right? Why are you getting into the space? Okay, what's the amount of money that you're willing to put in? What's the amount of time you're willing to put in? And after that, how are you going to protect yourself and your identity and your assets?
I have a question for Terry on that will connect to what you just mentioned, which is the gaming industry. We know is a big industry. There's a long history of video games and different consoles. PlayStation 5, Sega, I don't even know if it still exists. It's all in the past. I'm just curious, are you tapping into that gaming community, or are you tapping into a new community? Because when you look at conventional gaming, like the UI, the experience is all quite high-end, right? And you could argue that we're not there yet when it comes to blockchain games. I'm just very curious how you see, are you tapping into that market, or is it a new market that you're creating? More about that.
Okay, I think this question is quite tricky. I don't think we are actually tapping into the conventional gaming market, because I see a lot of big companies nowadays are actually looking for ways to try to use the blockchain technology as their foundation, because it's more secure, it's safer, transparent, easier for users to transfer their asset and etc. So whether it's the crypto market tapping into the traditional gaming, I think maybe not really. I think a lot of people starting to realize the technology of blockchain are changing the game. And in many ways, I see companies are working very hard to develop their own team to do the foundation of blockchain, to not just trying to use the tokenomics or anything, but simply just the blockchain foundation to ensure they have better performance and better environment for the players. So in that way, I think sooner or later, more company will use the blockchain technology to move to the next stage. And as for a GameFi company, we think that a lot of traditional gamers are seeking ways to learn about the crypto world. And what we are doing is we're trying to educate them from free to play style. When you're trying to enter the world, you don't actually have to pay for the NFT before you try the game. You actually try the game first, you study about it, you go to a community, check out the founders, and then you decide whether you join the game or not. I think the GameFi industry are getting more difficult for a lot of people to try to get in, because you see for the past 2 years, many people just doing it because they thought they can make money. But they haven't actually learned the whole thing before they actually execute. So I think in the near future, more company will start to look into ways to tap into the crypto world and start a project with the blockchain foundation.
Evan, I have one more question for you, and then I'd like to open it to the audience. It's a bit of a... We're seeing something in the Web 2 world, right? We see Elon Musk, who is buying Twitter, trying to fix Twitter. We see Mark Zuckerberg promoting Meta, his new rebranded but not decentralized Metaverse idea. Sometimes I think of 2017 ICO boom, and you realize so many companies are coming in, using blockchain, really not really for a good reason, just mostly to just be in blockchain. And sometimes I fear that, there can be some of these traces in today's market as well, where you see a lot of blockchain hype, and you wonder, does it really need to be on the blockchain? So what I'd like to ask you is, do you see a chance for these big Web 2 companies, Facebook, Twitter, to really drive this revolution? Or maybe this is a dangerous question, because you're a big company as well, and so I don't mind, because I think I can ask the question, and otherwise I'll say my opinion. But I think that it is important to discuss this.
So as a company, we're tiny compared to a Facebook or Meta, right? I mean, like Meta is what, 600 billion in valuation? Some of the largest data companies, 1.5 trillion in valuation, or over a trillion valuation. We're 6 billion valuation, right? We're nowhere near that. But you remember what gets them there. It's really the data layer, right? It's about extraction of everyone's data around this room. They all have each one of our data. They mine it for free without returns, and they sell it back to you in forms of advertising, in terms of changing your political views, etc. It's very, very monopolistic and very extractive. So in a way that, if you were to ask me, how would they go towards a Web3 environment, it's exactly how they did it with the Web2 environment with the creators economy. What happened in Web1 is that you can only read the web, right? It's a read-only web. And what happens in Web2 is that you can publish, read and write, right? So it actually completely disrupted the newspaper industry, news distribution business, right? But social media, right? This is the Web2 space, right? And then arises a new class of economy, which is the creators economy, but you're subject to the tax of the platforms, right? They can take your content down anytime. They say you own it, but in fact, they actually extract a lot out of that. You can build in Roblox, by the way, and build in Roblox mostly, and then you can sell it for money, but take a look at the spread. How much do you buy Roblox for, and how much can you sell yourself for? There's a huge extraction element to this, right? And it's not transparent. It's dominated by one company that makes these decisions, right? What is the ethos of this, right, ultimately? It's capitalism, right? Now, we can go forever on this one, by the way. I'll just be short on this. Because the companies are listed, it's very difficult for them to maintain the shareholder, to produce the same return to shareholder value by changing into a Web3 ethos. It's virtually impossible not to tank their valuation, right? So I would go from monopolistic in the data, say that, you know what, instead of just logging on Google or Facebook, whenever you log on to Facebook, you also log on to Google. Do you think that day will happen? I just can't see it, right? Why would they willingly give the customer out to, let's say, Animoca or give it to Google, etc.? Because the data, what is that they've collected is the most dear to them. What they're monetizing, and none of these databases communicate with each other. It's why you're actually digital slaves to these guys, right? Now, I'm not saying there's wrong with it because my life has changed positively because of Google and Facebook, etc. But this is why we're into Web3. It's because now we're democratizing data. And by having you guys creating your own stuff and selling in there, and then ultimately owning your own digital footprint enables you to do stuff with it. And rather than saying that, oh, it has been owned by Facebook, Facebook own my rules. Facebook's Meta already said what is their Web3 vision, their economic. It's their own. They're not opening up the data, and they charge you 47.5% for trading. Can you imagine your own creation, right? So, but I'll wrap with this before you open up the floor, right? Remember what Web3 ultimately is, the ethos of it, right? Why is there a token? There are 20,000 tokens out there, right? Cryptocurrencies out there in this world right now. What makes any one of them actually interesting? Is you have to look behind it. This is a do your own homework thing. And by the way, for the youngsters in this is your opportunity to flip itself, right? The old guys like even myself, right? And the friends that I have, those questions me every single day, why are you kind of like at this age entering a space like this? It's because the economy flips itself on its head. This is the opportunity where you get in something early, using your smarts, using your creativity, doing your homework, and you can get rich yourself, quote unquote, right? I'm not saying that get rich quick. I'm not saying that at all. But it's not that hard to make money in Web3 if you do your own homework. It isn't. It's still very, very early, okay? Remember what a token is. A token has no value in and of itself. A token stands for a unit of entrepreneurship and a unit of risky capital that you invest into a project, okay? That ultimately will only realize its value if the market gives it. So most of them might fail. But you're early, so your chance, your opportunity of getting in there, if you're dedicated in the space, you might find big value out of it.
A really good book, you must have read it, but is The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. It's the idea like that our data is like the oil, right, of the digital world, and it's just being taken from us. I'd like to open up the space to the audience. I hope you have questions, and otherwise I'll find another way to enter into a discussion with you guys. So anybody that has a question or comment or suggestion or complaint, maybe raise your hand. It's okay. Yes.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It's inspiring. I have two questions. One of them is I'm just curious on how the Web2 enterprise changes over time, especially everything has been changing and a lot of companies are getting on board on sandbox. What are their decision making like? Since most of them enterprises are not like emotional investors, right? They have plans, they have things. What are some of the things that will trigger them to get on right now? And my second question is, as an investor myself, I saw a lot of like Metaverse projects that are not surrounded by land, but there are like some kind of like application related. What are your thoughts about like multi-metaverse and how to synergize them together? Thank you.
I'm trying to think of an answer, really. I think, to be honest, the second question is how to create a combination of different metaverse trying to come together in one place. And I think it will be a culture issue, really. Like Evan said, if you are in the Web3 space, I think ultimately the people that are in the system, they can vote for whether they choose to have an open world or not. So I think maybe sooner or later, at some point, the world will start combining together, allowing different format of NFT traveling across different metaverse. Of course, some project doesn't have to be already in the metaverse already. They can be imported in a certain format, which would be accepted by different metaverse, for example, Sandbox or Decentraland. So you can put your artwork there, or even your 3D NFT character inside at some point. So I think it's just a matter of time how the technology will evolve and allowing different players to start to importing different NFTs across different metaverse.
I really agree with that, of course. And the first part of your question was about the Web2 companies, right? So quite similar. I think Evan's already touched on the majority of this, right? Web2 companies are increasingly so going to see how the market is shifting, and the change of mindset of the kinds of users that are really participating in this, right? As old money goes out, new money comes in, and where is the new money and attention going? Well, we're eventually going to start catching on, and as our kids and our younger generations as well are going to start catching on that, hey man, these Web2 companies, Facebook and Instagram, right, are monetizing and essentially making money off of content. Whose content? Our content. We're generating it for free for them. That doesn't really make sense, right? So in the evolution, and now we're seeing this graduation of acceptance of Web3, I think these companies are going to be faced with a decision on how they're going to be building their business models, right? I think, yes, today, Facebook might be valued at 600, whatever. I'm not sure if that's always going to be the case. I think that there's going to be major players in Web3 that are going to focus on giving the value back to users. Again, like what Evan said, we want to own what we produce, right? And we want to have the rights to what we produce. So these companies are going to be faced with the decision on exactly how they want to continue on really reaping in the benefits of other people's hard work. So it's a matter of time. I think it's going to happen. It is just going to happen. I think you were, as well. Somebody had asked me before of, I have a brief history in art dealership, right? And I think there's a lot of similarities, but also many problems that are solved. If we were to look at Web 2 versus Web 3, right? In my experience of working with art dealerships, I was appraising antique jade and wood, and back then, owning a piece of jade was very much like a status symbol, right? Having a tapestry at home, right, of you wearing a piece of jade sitting on a rare wood chair, right, and inviting your friends over, much like you said about the Peak, inviting your friends over, that was like the Ming or Qing dynasty version of a profile picture. It really is, right, if you think about it. So the shift is happening, right, but there's problems that we solve with technology of blockchain. Provenance, who owned these items that really make it that expensive? Who can verify Michael Jackson really owned his guitar that really makes its price 50 times worth of an original just retail guitar? Blockchain solves these problems. You can check provenance. And these are real. These are not fake things anymore. So, I mean, problems are going to be continually solved across industries. I understand it in the shipping industry as well. They're using blockchain to verify truth. So I think it's inevitable. And these companies are just going to have to make decisions sooner or later.
Maybe to add to that a little bit is that I do think we still have to go through a few waves of critical waves, you could say. There's a bunch of oxymorons, right? Contradictions that emerge as we interact with this new technology. So, for example, the idea of banks getting into Bitcoin. There's a whole bunch of strange contradictions. Bitcoin is basically the idea that you can be your own bank. Why do you need a bank to help you to be your own bank? Doesn't make sense. So there's a lot of questions around that. And I think also in the Web3 and Web 2 kind of in that growth process, we're going to run into more of that. So for example, as you mentioned, I think it's Facebook or Meta, why would they charge so much for your own work? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And as these contradictions come to light, That's when we make our choices. And maybe for us, it's a bit more difficult because, you know, we have our, I guess, we have that memory, like most people here, will have the memory of the kind of more analog life, you know, when you didn't know, when you don't. Like, first time I heard about email, I was in maybe end of primary school, and I didn't get it. I was like, why would you, my friend is there. Why would I email him? Didn't get it. Why would somebody have a phone outside? Like, why not, you know, there's people that were interviewed in Holland in 1989, 1998 or 89, and they were asking, like, would you have a mobile phone? And people were like, no. But why? I can just be at home. You know, if I'm not home, then call me later. And it's like, they asked the same people 20 years later the same question, and they were all like, yeah, I can't get rid of it. I'm so addicted. I'm trying to cut down my usage. There's some very big changes in our kind of mindsets that we still need to go through, and that includes the brands that you're talking about. That's why it's so interesting that Twitter, in a sense, is being taken private, because, as you mentioned, it's so difficult to kind of appease the shareholders and really kind of attack your own revenue model. But, you know, if you're Elon, you might be able, right? Can we open up maybe to one more question if there's somebody? Yes, wonderful. Michelle, maybe can help.
Thank you. Big fan of Animoca, by the way. You guys might not see yourself as Facebook, Google yet, but I feel like you guys would probably be like in Web 3.0. The Google of Web 3.0 is my opinion, to be frank. My question's actually a bit towards Maxwell and also to Evan as well. The first one, Maxwell, I want to understand a bit more about crypto custodian. So does that mean that you guys are protecting the private keys of the digital wallets, or are you guys like securing, you know, the smart contracts that are based in the blockchain? So I don't want to understand the security a bit more. I think this could be a further discussion later too. But towards Evan, it's in your envisionment of the metaverse. So there's two sides of the coin. There's what Meta's doing with a very, I would say, very into the world type of thing. So very interactive. But then there's also the flip side of the coin, which is what Animoca is doing with the web, with it being completely decentralized. Do you see Animoca Brands tapping into this element where where you guys would be developing a world where you guys can actually tap it, where you can like be truly immersive into as well? And what would this mean in terms of accessibility for different individuals tapping into this world? Thank you.
I agree. My answer is quite short, probably. We don't protect. We're not into contract auditing. We do protect the keys, and how you protect the keys. I mean, everyone here as well. It's actually a really good question. I'm glad you asked it. But everyone can, you know, if you were to be a little bit curious on how exactly funds are released, there are differences in what we call hot wallets, right? Warm wallets, cold wallets. Hot wallets are essentially wallets that are always connected to the internet. If anyone here has a Binance account, if you have money on your Binance, that's essentially a hot wallet, right? If CZ decides one day to just, you know, if anyone's watched Quadriga CX, that's pretty much it. But so there is cold storage as well there, right? But really the keys, if you don't have the keys, then you're not holding it cold for yourself. So Hex Trust, we do protect the keys. We offer different kinds of release schemes. Anyone here can look up what's the difference between a multi-sig release, an MPC release, or Shamir secret sharing, SSS. But yeah, that's a roundabout way to.
Yeah, I have something to say about that too. What Hex Trust is doing is really important, because you talk about institutional grade sort of custodian of private keys. We're still new, right? So right now we're talking about self-custody. And by the way, for you guys who want to learn more about this, you do want to maybe listen to one or two podcasts. One is Bankless, and these guys are all about self-custody, right? And it's very interesting hearing these two young guys talk about it. And they would never go for a custodian wallet, but at the end of the day, institution want to have multi-sig. They want to have extra layer of security. So it is very important what the Hex Trust is doing. We totally believe in what they do. In terms of the second part of the question about Animoca, we're agnostic as to where we go with the metaverse. We don't particularly believe that the way the metaverse is going to go is really going to be VR or AR. It doesn't have to go that way. We believe that naturally it will evolve in a certain direction, like maybe a Ready Player One kind of a scenario, but also doesn't have to go that way, because immersion isn't really about fooling yourselves with the immersive stuff. It's really about your engagement ultimately, and the way you find employment, the way you interact with one another, and what form you actually do that under. We don't necessarily believe that you have to be in a VR type of world. But we are certainly looking into that technology, because we believe that that is a part of the metaverse. We believe that AR might be a part that might come first in some applications, and it's a step at a time. But ultimately, we're also not about just games, because we're about Web3. And anything that applies to Web3 can actually transform and evolve certain industries we're in. So we're also in music, we're also in education, we're also in all sorts of other stuff. We're looking at decarbonization as well, right? Making the world greener via, being on the blockchain.
Guys, I would like to ask you to give an applause, and thank you so much, everybody.